right now we're not using. Go to mute, JB. Then it went off. It went. Thanks for all you on-time showers. I'm going to give it like 2 minutes and then we're going to get started. Just trying to give people a chance to flow in to the meeting, assuming that Zoom might be slowing people down.
Hey, JB.
Yes.
This is Fred. You just need to activate my video. If not, that's okay. I'm not showing up. That's the only problem.
It doesn't look like I'm controlling that. Next to your mute is, do you see a stop video button?
Yeah, it's on stop, but it says the host has to enable the video settings or enable me to show up my camera.
Okay. Let me see if I can figure that out. Okay, I had to make you co-host.
All right, we're good. Now they can get to see my ugly mug.
Well, thanks to everyone who's shown up. We're gonna just be thrilled that we got through our technical difficulties. And Lydia, why don't you get us started? You're on mute for now, Lydia.
All right. I too, my face cannot be seen, but hi, my name is Lydia Hostetler. I am the marketing manager for Envision Wealth Planning. We are so excited to talk to you today about student loans and how to repay them. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I recently graduated and most of my friends are still working on loans and feeling very discouraged. So really excited to hear from Fred and from JB as they are both very, very experienced in this topic. I hope you enjoy and I hope that this gets shared. We want this to be accessible to everyone. This is free for you and it is free to share with your friends. So starting with introductions, JB or James Brewer is my boss, founder and CEO of Envision Wealth Planning. Do you mind switching the slide so they can see your accolades?
Oh, well, I guess I got to do some work now.
There you go. So he is a certified CFP. He has certificates and awards, specifically fiduciary, but he also writes and educates through Forbes and through Rethinking 65 and other places. He got his degree in MIT, which is pretty cool. And he works specifically with Pay for Ed when it comes to student loans. So he has a specific plan that's for student loans to help people pay those off, which we'll talk about at the end. And then Fred Amarin is our guest speaker today. He is the founder of Pay for Ed. All of this that you'll see, the data, this comes from Fred. He is an expert in this field, and we're so excited to have him here. He is also a CFP and has written or been featured with the Wall Street Journal, Money Magazine, and US News. He got his degrees from St. Joseph University. So shout out there. And I will leave it to JB and Fred to tell you about the Pay for Ed and why we're here.
Thanks for the intro. I always say that this St. Joe grad is the person who knows the most that I've ever met when it comes to all things around college, from the decisions on what college to go to and what the financial obligation is likely going to be, which then leads to the student loans at the end. So Fred created a company specific to deal with this. So why don't I let him tell you a little bit about what is Pay for Ed?
Thanks, JB, and Lydia, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, we're really excited to be here today. This is kind of what my life is evolved to. I worked in corporate finance and was in planning and modeling there, and had an expertise in system design. My children were headed into college. I decided to make a leap of faith and had my own RRA and built this all in Excel. And then 2015, someone said, let's bring us to the web. And that's where we are today. And so this is real life experiences for me. I've been in this business for almost 20 years now. And what makes us really different is what JB said, is we take you from either how to save for college, you have a middle-aged student, all the way to student loan repayment. Today, we're going to focus on just the back end because your debt structure, hopefully you've made the right decisions beforehand. Your debt structure will drive your repayment and forgiveness options. So understand your debt structure is going to lead into forgiveness options, repayment options, and other things here. And what makes this is getting very complex. And what makes this different is we're moving actually to a model similar to your taxes. It's going to be unique to each person. The loan servicers, you may have the perception that they're going to be able to help you. Their advice is limited due to this new complexity. And that's what JB and I bring to you. And hopefully, you get the expertise. As I said, due to this complexity, I really think in the next, say, 12 to 24 months, we'll see this more like the IRS, where you're going to have to get the CPA, enrolled agent, or tax professional involved or with us to make the right decisions and make the repayment work best for you. So that's what we do.
So how did we meet? Well, I learned about Pay for Ed itself, and then I became something, and I'll let Fred tell you what I became.
So JB has a designation called the College Funding Student Loan Advisor. As part of that, he uses our software, but I have the most approved courses approved by the CFP on both college funding, student loan repayment, and student loan forgiveness. And so we have newsletters that you can sign up for. The advisors, we have a monthly meeting discussing everything to keep everyone up to date. There's been so many changes. Actually, the past month, we had 2 presentations because there's so many changes. So that's the designation JB has. So he has the same knowledge or can get the same answers through his practice, because this is all we do. So if you're looking, again, I would tell you to take a broader picture, looking at retirement planning and other things, because it all gets linked together, and that's what JB can bring to you.
So I'll just add that there is an advisor finder. So if you happen to be on the call and would rather work with someone in person, There is an advisor finder to look for advisors who also have the same designation that I have. So kind of why are we talking about student loans? And I'll just go to the next slide, then let Fred tell you more than you probably ever heard before.
So, we get the news from the Supreme Court's decision to come back. Everyone was hoping for forgiveness and that we'd have the $10,000 or $20,000 amount that it would happen. That didn't happen. But at the same time, the White House was not happy and the Department of Ed, and added a whole new set of issues that have to happen. Now we've gone 3.5 years without this. This just gives you a time frame. As you know, right now we're in this maybe trying to get restarted, the confusion. We're also going to see a new complexity where if you're using what's called income-driven repayment, it's going to be linked to your taxes. This is where the advanced planning needs to come into play, and your colleges and loan servicers cannot give you that advice. So this is part of the problems here. Interest will start getting charged on September 1. Payments start depending on what your anniversary date, or will start on 10/1. Again, you'll get notifications from your loan servicer. Then we have a new thing called fast certification that has to do with the integration. And then some other things here. And I think the biggest issue is now in 24, we're also going to have this automation of IRS data into the repayment and FAFSA process. So there's a lot of changes going on, a lot of confusion. So you got to really be careful where you get your information from. And just in a general rule, everyone makes general statements and it's getting to be very specific to each person. So this is where you need the advice of a professional.
So I just want to throw two clarifications I can think of. So one, Fred earlier said he started an RIA, that stands for Registered Investment Advisory Firm, which is one that provides investments and financial planning advice that is fiduciary, meaning that we're supposed to keep your interests ahead of our own. And then when he was talking about taxes, you may not be aware that you can make certain decisions that affect what your tax bill is. He's going to show us a hard example later on, but know that things like an IRA or a 401k contribution can actually reduce your income. And, you know, most people have never had a course or fully understand how taxes work, but there are some things that you can actually control that could make your repayment be different than what it otherwise would be when it's based on your income, because it's the taxable income, not necessarily the income that was your gross income.
Yeah, so the next part here, I know everyone's been pretty upset with the Supreme Court's decision. I really think, again, they're taking some heat. And what we have to recognize, just as this is trying to be apolitical, is that Congress is really the rule setters, and really the loan servicers are the implementers. I mean, they're getting the rules and things like that. So they get a lot of heat, and in reality, they're just reacting. So don't always take it out on them. Our Congress people, both sides of the aisle, have to get the rules right, and that's what's happening right now. And they're adding to the complexity and confusion. What some people were hearing on the street is that you're mad, you're not going to pay it back. That will have serious consequences. Now, again, the White House has come out with some new rules, new programs that could help in that, but those new rules also could have not be approved for the same reason. These were approved through executive orders, and because of the cost, it may not go back. So just want to make sure you understand, if you don't decide to pay it back, the consequences is your credit score could be impacted, which is going to impact your ability to borrow money in the future. They can garnish wages, they can garnish Social Security, they can garnish tax refunds. You won't be able to borrow any additional student loans in the future until that gets back on track. So again, I highly recommend you look at the different repayment options. Do not think, okay, I'm just not going to pay it after you didn't have to pay it for 3 years.
So we told you about some pitfalls, and we're going to walk through them slowly, but let's give you kind of our list of 5 right now. And that is one, not potentially understanding the repayment plan that you picked, or the one that might have been told to you by a friend, or when you called up an 800 number and they might have said, well, everybody else seems to be picking this one. Then misunderstanding forgiveness. There's different ways people might frame the word forgive, like I forgive you, which kind of completely says get rid of forgive and forget. But there are still forgiveness in the way that it's defined prior to what I think many were hoping regarding, what President Biden and some other people had been talking about. So we'll talk about those. And then misunderstanding debt consequences. So there's different types of debt I found in my practice that sometimes people think about, say credit card versus mortgage being different, but in some ways it's all debt. So let's talk about that because this kind of fits in that whole I'll broadly speak about, how you're going to repay your debt. Then misunderstanding the tax implications. Fred briefly said something earlier regarding the income dependent or income-based repayment plans. So there are ways ways for you to think about taxes and its implications regarding, well, maybe I could pay less on my loan versus more on my loan, and I may have to pay a bit more in taxes. So it's taking a more comprehensive look in your financial picture. And then finally, not having a full picture of your finances. And that always, to me, can lead to, very focused in one area decisions at the expense of another. So we'll start and go a little deeper on not understanding the plan you picked. So we'll let Fred take it for the next couple of slides.
So one quick thing here with the restart also with JB here is understanding what repayment options that you have. Again, a lot of this will be driven by the debt structure, but I want to make sure of 2 points that you have to be aware of. Again, after the 3.5 years, but we also had 18 million people that changed over. And we also have almost 4 classes that graduated that have never been in the system. And what happens there with the default or setup is that you'll be in the 10-year standard, which is the most expensive. So this is, again, a reason why I have to understand all this stuff. So again, most of the programs have to be direct federal loans. They're called that. Older loans, they don't exist anymore. We'll call it FFEL. So if you're a borrower that's on the call here today that has older loans, you could have FFEL loans. And the best way to find that out is go to the studentaid.gov website. There's also, you have 2 or 3 pieces here. The Parent Plus loans and Grad Plus loans, again, that's the debt structure. You have income-based and income-driven repayment methods that are going to use your interest. So the standard methods will use typically, like a car loan where income-based will not always. So again, this is where it is. The Parent Plus loans have higher interest rates and also are available. There are some limitations with the Parent Plus loans and the Grad Plus loans. And then private loans, we hear all the news. About 90% of the student debt is federal loans. Only about 10% is private. So that's where, again, most of the focus is. And the private loans will typically go under, normal underwriting like a car loan or a mortgage, where it's going to look at your debt to income ratios and things like that. The federal programs have better repayment options, forgiveness options, and flexibility. So when you leave the federal program and change to a private loan, you can't go back with those loans that you move to the private side. You can get new federal loans, but you can't use the federal programs to repay it.
I think I'm just going to get to this slide for you, Fred.
Okay. So again, here are the methods. The standard method is, a traditional loan. There's 10, and then the graduated. These are both 10-year programs. Again, they will be the most expensive. The graduates, I'm not a big fan on because it changes every 2 years. I'd rather see people use the extended graduate or the graduated extended. Again, I'm not a big fan of the graduate, and that's going to be based, the time length will be anywhere from 10 years, where on the extended method will be from 12 years up to 30 if you do a consolidation. So again, getting into some of the complexities here. Income-based or income-driven repayment methods are totally different. Where
yeah, can we just check? So I just want to be clear to everybody. So graduated is, it may start at a lower number, but then every 2 years, I think Fred's saying that it's just got to go up and up and up, instead of trying to keep a straight line with the standard is trying to keep a straight line. So, someone that might see themselves in a job that potentially has known 3%, 4% raises, that's potentially when graduated might make sense. But there aren't a lot of jobs that kind of have like this. We know for certain you're going to have an increase like every couple of years.
Yeah, and they get expensive on the back end specifically. So that's why we're not a big fan. And rather, again, I come from, I'm pretty conservative as a general sense. And then the income-based repayment methods, there's one we have here that's the new one that will go in effect. It's called SAVE, but they all follow the same rules. It's going to use your family size, the poverty table, and either 10, 15, or 20% of that resulting calculation. And this is where the complexity starts to go in. You now get into your tax planning. You can, as JB mentioned earlier, managing, it's going to be based off what's called your adjusted gross income, or AGI, off your taxes. So here's where, if you're qualifying for loan forgiveness, you have to use an income-driven repayment method to do this. What has to happen is you could be paying $300 and your actual interest is $350, and you could have a payment, or the interest being growing. It's called negative amortization. And JB has a slide going forward. And we often hear that, hey, I've been paying $300, but my loan balance keeps on going up. The loan servicer's goal is to keep you current. And often you don't either hear it or they don't explain it to you. And this is where, again, getting other advice and looking at more holistic. For some people, if you're qualifying for forgiveness, that negative amortization is a good thing, because if you're now maximizing, you'd be growing retirement assets in one case, and then you're paying a lower amount for your loan repayment. So again, this is some of the complexities we'll see in a few minutes. But as JB mentioned earlier, this is some of the misunderstandings. People don't understand what they're signing up for, and it gets very confusing.
So we just have a copy to give people an idea that inside of the software that Pay for Ed provides for repayment, it actually calculates the numbers that you would qualify for in each one of the programs. So, just on the first two, again, it's just an example. So we're just trying to illustrate that the standard extended in this case would save somebody to start off $830, but down the road, Fred's explaining it's got to be much higher than the $1,889. It just is going to increment over time. And it just kind of shows you that there are various numbers that change over time, and they can also change based upon marital status as well.
Yeah, and this is where the tax piece gets linked in, and why the loan servicers cannot legally give you, or the colleges give you, that advice that someone like JB can give you. So again, doing the tax planning piece and how to manage the AGI is becoming more and more important.
So we've used forgiveness a couple of times here, and it's not the one that people were upset that went away, but there's still forgiveness. So there's a lot of misunderstanding that I had heard prior to what President Biden was hoping to provide. So let's get a little deeper into that.
So probably one of the most popular one is called public loan forgiveness. This is if you work for the federal government or nonprofit, 501c3. You have to be a full-time employee. You have to make 120 on-time payments. Do not need to be consecutive. They have to be direct federal loans. Again, the debt structure is important. Again, here's where you could be paying substantially less. It's not going to cover the true interest of the loans. But at the end of the day, because you work for a certain employer, you will then qualify for this forgiveness. And so this is a marvelous program when you take that opportunity to help people with those type of jobs. There's also called the end of term, which is non-public service loan forgiveness. That can happen between 20 and 25 years. Now, the biggest difference between the two, you have to, again, use the income-driven repayment methods to qualify. But the public service loan forgiveness, that amount that's forgiven is tax-free. Under the normal IRS rules, if you had, say, gone out to the 20 years and now you had $100,000 that was forgiven under the end of term or the non-public service loan forgiveness one, what would happen there is that amount, say it's $100,000, that's going to get added into your income for that year and be taxed. So say you're at the maximum bracket, you saved $100,000 in loan forgiveness, which was a good thing, but now you have to pay $37,000 on federal taxes on that amount that's forgiven. And that just follows the normal IRS rules on any debt forgiveness that occurs. So again, there are the two differences you need to be aware of.
And I'd like to add that if you have been going on, let's say, a payment plan that did not pay the interest charges, those interest charges would have been added to the loan. So your loan may have started out being 100 or 200,000, and by the time that period ends, you could be, upwards, let's say, of $400,000 or more, and then that's going to get added at that future income. So, your income it's not your income today, and it's not the principal of the loan today. It'll be what it is in the future, which could make a lot of people very unhappy. So I think we can move beyond that one. Okay, and then misunderstanding the consequences of debt. So I've had a few conversations, and sometimes people tend to think of debt types and have different mindsets. So student loans, car loans, credit cards, and say mortgages. So what's interesting about car loans and mortgages is that there is an economic or a financial asset that's associated with it. So often you're going to see different kinds of interest rates because, well, the mortgager can take your house if you don't pay. That's why I usually say you're not a homeowner, you're actually a home debtor until you actually have paid the home off, but most people aren't really considering that. And then on the left-hand side, well, credit cards, as soon as you get, the suit, see, I wore one just on purpose. So when you get the suit and it's now tailored, then it doesn't get returned because now it's customized to you. So the credit card company is kind of stuck. And then, of course, there's student loans. But I wanted people to start to think of, well, the student loan, you are the asset. So, ideally, you went to college and you now have a skill that is higher than it would have been had you not had the student loans. The sooner you pay this off, you have a better ratio as you let them go. But I know that sometimes, people might think, well, I don't really want to pay my student loan. I really want to have a mortgage. Well, a mortgage is just another type of loan. I really want a car, and maybe I'll try to pay the car off early. Well, what about your student loan? Yeah, I don't really want to pay the student loan. So just sometimes we have to just say, hey, look, it's all debt. And we shouldn't frame it quite as much, although credit cards typically are going to be the one that has the highest interest rates. And actually, they do have some disclosures on their negative amortization, which they tell you, hey, you don't have to pay the whole thing. So Fred used the phrase negative amortization. So I found this table. So let's give the balance credit for this table. I just added a little portion to just try to make it clearer. So if you are simply making the minimum payment, but the interest cost ends up being higher than the payment, then you start to see that the ending balance gets added. And by the end, this is just 12 months. If you're not making the complete payment because it's getting added, then now you have a higher balance. And I, have had a client where, when they graduated, the student loans were maybe 200,000. And by the time they showed up in my life, they were 275,000. And they were wondering, how did it go up? Because I was making payments. Well, it was a case that you were making payments, but the payments weren't keeping up with the interest charge. And the higher the balance, typically you're going to see, very large interest charges if your loan values are $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, and you're not being asked to make a payment that covers that. So you should be aware that that's what's going on. And we know certain circumstances you may need to quote unquote do what you need to do, but know that at some point, if you're not adjusting, then these are the things that will lead you to unwanted additional circumstances. So I recently wrote an article that you could find on Forbes. If you Google my name and Forbes.com, where I said, at some point, and Fred and I had talked about this kind of separately, that if you start to think that often we're dealing with people with 200,000 plus in student loans, and not all of them are doctors, they're in different professions. But at some point, if you actually went to buy a house, then that's going to start to look like the dollar amount of a mortgage. But in that case, the mortgage is designed to have you have it paid off over a certain period of time, where if you're just making, more income dependent payments, you're not trying to pay it off. And I know that many people try to, pay as little as they can potentially on this student loan so they could go and buy a few of these other things. So just want us to be aware that that's an issue. So then I actually even went a step further and said, well, what if we actually put some numbers to this? So we found a calculator online. And, you might say, but I have $200,000 in loans. Well, okay, we put in, I think, about a 7% interest rate at the end of 15 years, but I don't know many people are opting for a 15-year, then you would have paid $318,906. Now, ideally, your house would be worth at least $318,906 at the end of the 15 years, because then you could say, oh, well, yeah, I paid all that, but, at least it's worth that. And oh, by the way, what you might think about deductible interest, it's not what it used to be, and it's not what you think. And we'll save tax conversation for another day. But notice if you do 30 years, it's 517. So about $200,000 more in interest on top. So I just want you to be aware that as you're thinking about a mortgage, and if you go out for 30 years, and you might even be thinking, hey, well, I won't hold it that long, but you're never guaranteed what the dollar amount's going to be in the future. Personal story, my parents bought a house in the late 50s and for $17,500, and in 2005 sold it for $7,500. So it was a true loss from the original price, not including what they paid in mortgage, etc. So when some people thought, oh, but it's an asset and I'm going to make money on it, there's truly no guarantee, because we don't know what the future will be for the neighborhood that you start off that might have been wonderful. So now let's move on to the pitfall of not considering taxes. And actually, I'm going to really expand it, not considering trading off taxes and potentially lower or higher payments with your loans.
Hey, JB, can I just jump in here real quick before we go
Yes.
there?
Yes.
On those 2 points there, what people also have to realize, this is where we get into the college planning piece, which again, you have that designation. But when you look at your mortgage and your car payments, there's typically a third party that approves you for that loan, where when you look at your college funding side, you are the person that does all the analysis. There's a third party that says that on college funding, this is part of the problem that we have today. And then the other part that also is associated, so why do people think that the bankruptcy rules are so tough around student loan repayment? Well, when you have a car or a house, there's a physical asset that you just mentioned that they can go back and get. When you have an education, they're not going to cut your head off to see what's in your brain. So that's why the bankruptcy rules are so hard. And that's why we have the debt problem that we have, is that this process is fully dependent on your ability to do the analysis. And the colleges only give you 1 year at a time. So that's what also makes it more difficult for people to plan for it. And there's no consequences while you're taking it on. Just so people know.
So, and yes, and unfortunately, no education during. When you go to the Pay for Ed website, you can learn that there are some things, if you know someone who might benefit from thinking about loans prior to taking them, junior and senior in high school, potentially there's some things to do while you're in school. Fred has another program for that as well, that you'll find out. But if you're in the repayment, then you can't go backwards. So here's an example that he built that I think will show several things kind of all at once. So back to you, Fred.
Yeah, so this is just an example, just to put a sense of what's going on here. This is a married couple. He's a school teacher. She's a business person. She had received a significant increase in salary and promotion. I don't know if she changed jobs. They also have 2 children, and his debt was to go back for grad school. Again, this is something else on the planning side. I have a daughter that's a teacher, but here in Pennsylvania, I'm in Pennsylvania, you have to have your master's degree to teach in the public schools after 5 years. So this is what he did. And so now there's their income. They're going to be fine. Again, on the tax side, the tax preparer is going to say, most tax efficiently is going to be filed on joint. Now with this increase, their payment's going to go from about 400 to 720 is what they're estimating. And he is qualified and worked 4 years in the public school system, and he has 48 months earned at this point in time. So now what happens is, JB, next slide. You go to your tax advisor, and they're going to say, okay, well, again, most tax efficiently would be filed minor and joint, which is true. And this gets into the conversation we had at the very beginning, is there's a new automation that's going to bring your IRS data directly into the FAFSA and directly into student loan repayment. So now we have to do some advanced planning, but here is also the dilemma that we face, and that you as a borrower and us as financial planners, me specifically, am out talking to the tax preparers. They would be your CPAs, your enrolled agents, other tax professionals. They don't know anything about this, or very few do. But here, they're going to recommend that you file your taxes married and joint, because if you file married and separate, it's going to cost you another $2,000 in taxes. So why would you ever do that? Again, their primary goal is to lower your taxes as best we can. So we have to do some things. We've moved all the income, or so all the pre-tax advantages. And this is the advice that JB would provide, taking a more holistic view, moving all your retirement to the person that has the debt. Then we saw he makes $60,000. Now we've been able to get his AGI down to 45. And that's what his repayment's going to use, because if you remember what I said a few minutes ago, you have to use an income-driven repayment method to qualify for loan forgiveness. He works for a school district, which he now will qualify for. And now what will happen? So here's the next piece. Next slide. By now seeing this, now we can see the software where it's going to generate, if we file married and joint, which the tax preparer would tell you is more tax efficient, but my monthly payment, because it's going to use both our income, is going to be $804 and not the estimate of $720. But if we do now file married and separate and do the other tax planning things, moving the benefits to the right person, maximizing that the best way, the monthly payment could be $64. So now that we're doing this, we're adding assets, adding money into retirement plan, adding money into maybe a health savings account, and lowering our monthly payment to $64. And we're going to be covering in the next slide here is the difference.
I just think this is mind blowing. I thought I was trying to let this stay on. Like, you mean $64?
Yep.
That is pretty darn amazing.
And that's just using the calculations. But at the end of the day, again, getting the right advice. And as we talked about earlier, the loan servicers, even though you expect, they cannot legally tell you the things that we just told you. They can't do the plan and say, okay, how are we going to look at which way we file our taxes? Where should we put our adjusted gross income or our retirement planning dollars? These are the things that JB can bring to the table. But here's the net effect. So you're still worried about the $2,000. They're going to be filing married and separate. Their payment's going to be $64. The $168 is to cover the $2,000 of increased taxes. And now this family basically is saving $500 a month cash flow in their pocket, saving them $6,000 a year. That's why you need to go to the professionals. They can help you do this, the right people that understand how to do this the right way. So the loan, we are talking to CPAs, trying to get them up to speed. But again, it goes against their primary goal. And I can be honest, we've had customers, I had a customer where the CPA actually had the client sign a document saying, I don't agree with this, but I'm doing this based on your behalf, and I have no consequences to do that. So again, they're not understanding yet because they've had too much work actually on the COVID side to worry about this new phase. But again, can you imagine if you went to your tax provider and he said, oh, file married and joint, and you get your bill at 804, and now you could have been paying 64. Are you going back to that CPA the following year? Probably not.
And this to me is part of, comprehensive planning. Fred and I are both certified financial planners. One of the things that we are taught in that curriculum is just simply about tax planning as opposed to tax preparation. So what he's showing, or what Fred's showing here, is tax planning. Ultimately, the tax preparer is the person who would kind of give you your final real number. The software is approximating things. So it's good to get the actual real number. There may be a set of circumstances that tweaks your number, but ideally, you would need to know this other number, that this $64 in this case. You'd have to have the software or something to help you figure out that number, then to go further and look at the additional details.
Yeah, and JB, let me just go back. I mean, the government website is a good website, but the problem there is it uses automation to help you. So if you don't check the right boxes, you can't see all the options. And what we've done is create that environment that you can do it. And I just want to make one statement. I have the most approved course of the CFP, but I don't actually have my designation of the CFP, just so you know that, JB. So,
Okay, all right.
So just a disclaimer there. But here's an example we talked about in earlier. The yellow, the system identifies the yellow here, and this is the negative amortization piece. So in this case, this person is going to qualify for public loan forgiveness, and the negative amortization normally would be a bad thing, as we had talked about earlier. In any other debt situations, in most cases, it is. But in this case, on top of the $6,000 you save this client, the negative amortization, because it's public loan forgiveness, remember I said it's tax-free, they're going to save another $92,000. So they never had to pay back, going back to what JB showed with the mortgages of the 15. We don't have to pay this back. So now basically this advice over the next 6 years, this client's going to basically save almost $125,000 to $130,000 between the savings and all that's the advice that's given. So again, it can change someone's life, and at the same time, they're adding money into the retirement plan. So it's an upside all the way across.
And Fred and I worked on a case with one of my clients where we got to a number that's not too far from this one, with a particular set of circumstances that were close to this case. So I have actually seen it work. So then now let's move to the pitfall of not seeing the whole picture, So, one of the things is that just depending upon who you're talking to, sometimes people see it through their own lens. Sometimes what the old joke as, to a carpenter, all of the answers seem to have a nail that's going in the wood. So depending upon who you're talking to, they may have more of a singular approach, or they only have a limited set of facts that they've actually had to study. So that's why you often aren't getting the advice from, say, making one phone call that you might if it was a bit more broad. So a place to get started is, do you have all the facts? And often I have people who come to me for help, but and I don't blame anyone, but like I don't really want to look at the debt, especially if I feel like I can't pay it. But Fred needs to know, what is the true set of facts based upon your situation. So we need to know all of the debt facts and more specifics about your own loans. And part of this software can actually upload your federal loans, given that you have the FSA ID and password. Then understanding what are your payment options. Depending upon your situation, I like paying it off as opposed to, now, if you have the public service loan forgiveness, we just saw a wonderful opportunity to say, hey, look, I'm going to go work here. I've actually had clients that didn't fully understand this because they potentially moved from one employer to another who was going to offer them more money. They thought, I'm making more money, but not understanding that the more money came with the consequence of, well, your income-based repayment just changed. And oh yeah, by the way, you no longer qualify for public service loan forgiveness based upon the employer that you're with. So sometimes all cash flow isn't the same cash flow once you begin to understand what the consequences are.
Yeah, and JB, just as a footnote there, what's really important is who pays you. So I'll give you an example. My daughter she received a scholarship for her master's degree, but she had to work for a school district. She's a speech pathologist. But many of the school districts outsource that through a third party. She may be working at the school district, but not being paid by that person. It's actually who's on the W-2. So that you need to be really careful about that too.
Lots of details that matter, right?
Yep.
And then, evaluate your budget. So I like what I would call a zero-based budget. So if you were a senior, let's say in college, you haven't accepted a job yet, good for you, because now you're learning about public service loan forgiveness. There may be an opportunity for you there. And then you could have a zero-based budget. What do I mean? Well, you could put on the 10-year, the 25-year number as part of your payment, and then decide what rent and what car and what other things you could afford around that. I typically know that that's not how most seniors are thinking about it. And they're probably forgetting that in the gross number they're being offered, there's going to be taxes, especially if they've never had a job before, and all the taxes that are going to be assessed. So they're not going to be getting a net cash flow. They're thinking of the gross number. But if you are already working, then sometimes it's an issue of, well, how can I free up cash flow? Well, if you're renting, not buying, you have a 12-month window in most cases to think about, okay, maybe there's a place for me that I can find a way to spend a little bit less money on my rent. Maybe not buying a car, or maybe getting a less expensive one. And I know it's easy to say, hey, I've worked hard, don't I deserve this? But you deserve to have more money down the road and not be so encumbered with this debt thing that, usually people at some point throw their hands up just because they can't see a way out. So we want to provide you hope and resources to help you. And you might also find that you can delay, not save for retirement, but delay. I had somebody recently where I recommended that for a period of time that they delay saving for retirement. So in their case, get control of their credit card debt. And that was going to make it easier to pay off some student loans that somehow the credit card debt had gotten out of whack. And then guess what? After a year or 2 years, whatever the time period is for you, what was going out to pay off that debt, now you're not seeing the negative amortization or any interest add to the loan, as we've seen. But now you can take that cash flow and apply that to retirement, which could be an additional amount, because if you delay, usually there's some makeup that you have to do on the amount. But now you can have that funded from the cash flow that's no longer flowing out. And Fred came up with this wonderful slide, so I'm going to just let him speak to that.
Yeah, so what do you need to do to get ready for the restart? What's probably most important is that you go to the studentaid.gov website. Again, many of you are not familiar with that. The government has done a good job over the last few years of consolidating all these subsystems, but you're going to need what's called your FSA ID and password. That's what you use to complete the FAFSA or sign your FAFSA form. You'll need that. And then what you want to do is go into that website and update all the information. So people that maybe they've graduated has an old email address, or maybe it's an email you don't use anymore. Make sure you reset your password to studentaid.gov. It's probably going to ask you that. Make sure, again, as I talked about the automation, the IRS and the loan servicer and studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov is the Department of Ed system. What you want to do is match that all up exactly. So what I mean by that is on your 1040, have that in front of you. If it's your current address, make sure it matches that exactly. So if you abbreviated Avenue as AVE, make sure you have AVE and not Avenue across all three systems. So your tax return, what's on studentaid.gov, and on the loan servicer website. Now, why is studentaid.gov important also? One, you have all this new information that's going to come up using that content and information, but also 18 million people got changed loan servicers. You may not know who your new servicer is. There it has all your loan detail. You need that information to use our system. There's a text file with all your loan detail. You'll have your anniversary date. So it's a great place to go. Update it with your cell phone so they have double authentication now. And all that kind of stuff can happen. So again, this is where you want to match this all up across the board with all three resources to make sure that you don't miss any information that they're sending to you. As far as the IDR timing here, it's still an open issue. There's some flexibility with the student loan repayment piece, but you need to make sure what's on file, and then what your anniversary date when we restart. If you're using the income-driven repayment methods, you need to make sure when that date is, what's on file. So let me give the example. If, say, someone got married during COVID, as the example we just had, and maybe they got married during COVID, what's on file right now is they're married and joint. Well, that's what the IRS, or sorry, that's what the Department of Ed is going to use. If you're using an IDR method, it's going to use that joint income, and that could cause a problem for you. So again, if you have had those changes, make sure that you know what's on file. And then if you have time, make sure you get the information updated in the tax room. It takes about 6 weeks in overall between your anniversary date if you're using an IDR method. So, okay. Gibby, just as a quick note, we only have about 5 to 7 minutes left, just so you know that.
I'm tracking.
Got it.
Okay. So we've talked about a holistic view. And yes, there is going to be this commercial for working with my firm, and which if you're on student loans, you end up working with Fred as well. So we have something we call asset map. It's more than just your assets, it's your entire picture. So we want to know all about your financial information to then begin to start giving you the proper advice. You've seen today that the taxes can affect things, your ability to pay, which could be, credit card debt and what you're doing. And there's so many things. So we want to start with this holistic picture. Most people tell me that they don't even really know what they have. So this is one place for us to get started in order for us to deliver the best advice. So there's something called an asset map. That's what we just showed you. So that for us would be kind of the beginning of starting a relationship with us. And then based upon what direction that made sense for you, we have our comprehensive services that help you with everything. We could be simply focused on student loan planning and paying for that as well. Sometimes, if you are married, both spouses have their own student loan. So, what's the right path for you there? And then, of course, to help you find the right and best path for you to pay off your loan. I also want to say that today we really talked about the former student, now working person paying off their loan. But we know that there's something called Parent Plus loans. And one of the highest growing areas of student debt is Parent Plus loans. So we're going to be doing this again next month, and we're going to be focused there talking about Parent Plus loans. So if your parent is helping you, or you might be finding that you're paying off the Parent Plus loan. I know a couple of people that had that circumstance that the parent said, I need you to pay for the loan because I'm trying to save for retirement or whatever their financial situation is. So I want you to be aware that there is a do-it-yourself option. You don't have to work through a college funding and student loan advisor like me. You could decide, hey, I really want some help. I think that Fred's software is amazing, but maybe I can just think through all of the things myself. Let me have at it. So if you go to the student loan repayer on his website, you can then get access to the software. If you do want our help, our code is going to take you to where to start the relationship, not directly to signing up for the software. So that will just give you an idea of how to get things going with us, and we can help you navigate the intricacies of your situation. So we have a couple of questions. We may have answered them. I hope that we did, which the question was, can the PSLF program payment schedule be negotiated, or there are options? Hopefully you saw that the software does provide what your options are, but you also saw that depending upon the factors we showed you today, that we may be able to get your income to go down. And there's many different ways potentially for that to be possible. And your situation's unique, but directly negotiating, Fred, I'm not aware that that is an option.
No, the only time that's an option, JB, once in a while, is someone coming out of default where they can negotiate that price or that payment just so they can get back on track. There's a program kind of fast start that right now it's working. But I just want to also say about the software, as you saw the complexity and how you really need a more holistic approach. The software is going to generate your numbers, but it's not going to give you the advice that JB could give you with managing, who should take what retirement plan or deductions you can be taking and things like that, the tax strategies. The software is going to run the numbers, but you're going to have to know this information. There is some help there, but it's not going to be as specific as what JB could offer.
Thanks. I didn't even pay him for that. Do you think the new forgiveness plan will go through? I'm asking this of Fred because he's got people at higher places than me. Do you think the new forgiveness plan will go through, or will they be able to adjust the percentages in the income adjusted loans?
So the person's asking about the new SAVE program was part of the reaction from the non-forgiveness from the federal government. Actually, it was announced before that also. I think it's going to run into some problems personally. And this is what's frustrating for me. And, when we work with customers and things like that, this appears to be following the same path as we saw with forgiveness. Wharton had done a study prior to this. When they announced the forgiveness, this was part of the announcement. This new income-driven repayment method is going to cost, the White House is estimated to be $154 billion. When Penn redid their numbers range from anywhere from about $400 billion to $580 billion. So just like the original loan forgiveness, the 10 and 20, the executive orders exceeds their power. It has to go through Congress. We have another problem with this when you start looking from a fiscal standpoint. The debt ceiling program that was allowed did not allow for any things like this. So if it does get approved, there has to be that same reduction in other areas to be consistent with that. So there's a high probability that this could change again. So I hate to say that, but that's the reality.
So, and my take on it is the two that we discussed earlier, the public service loan forgiveness and I guess the make 25 years of worth of payments, those existed prior to what Biden was hoping to get through. And they still are around. A lot of the other ones are highly controversial because whenever you multiply, say, the 10,000 by a lot of borrowers, that's a lot of money. So I understand the hope for something that would be more substantial, But also keep in mind that new students coming into the program, they would want some forgiveness if you got forgiveness. I don't even know we've really talked about that. And, you know, administrators and professors want to get paid. So it's really a complicated situation. I know why we're hopeful for an easy, remove some of the burden answer, but the complexity of it, to me, I think it's just going to make the answer that most people, or that many people would like, difficult to implement.
And Jimmy, I think what's also important is it's still an income-driven repayment method. The complexity we talked about strategies on managing the AGI, how to file your taxes is still going to be existent with the new program, no matter if it does. Now, one other little note, at least we've recommended initially until we get more clarity. If you are in repay, you'll get moved over to save. But if you're in one of the other repayment methods, until we have more clarity, I would probably wait a few months to make sure that that gets approved, because the differences between repay and the other methods are pretty substantial. It doesn't allow for married and separate. Under the new SAVE program, it would. There's a whole lot of changes that you need to be really careful about. I wouldn't be rushing over. Now, if it does goes forward, it is the best program because it offers the most amount of benefit. So just so you know that.
All right. Well, I believe we are at time. We thank everyone who could attend live. This will be on recording too. So whichever one that you enjoyed, we look forward to any feedback, especially knowing that we're going to talk about the Parent Plus in the future. If there's some clarities or something that you'd like for us to cover for the next one. So thanks again to you, Fred, for joining us.
Thanks, JB, for having me. It's a great, nice honor to be invited. So hopefully we helped.
All right. Have a great day and time wherever you're listening. Goodbye.